Hey guys, it's Shara from Woodshop Diaries, and in this video I'm going to show you how I built a hutch shelf for my pantry. So where this is going to be going, it's going to sit on top of some existing base cabinets that I already have installed. There's a wall on this side and there's another cabinet on that side, so this is actually designed to fit kind of into like a nook, which is why the crown molding is cut square. This shelf is designed to sit on top of any kind of existing base, whether that be cabinets or a dresser or a console, and it can be built where it fits perfectly into a nook, or it can be open on the sides. But in that case, you would probably want to wrap the crown molding around the corners. We'll talk about more of those little details throughout the project, so if you're ready to dive in and get building, let's go.
This project is a little out of the ordinary for me because normally I would use plywood to build something like this from, but for this particular project I used one-back instruction boards because this will be going into my pantry and I wanted it to match the existing drawer fronts, plus I kind of wanted it to have that country rustic feel. Either way, 1x12s or 3/4 inch plywood would work fine for the main body here. I cut my 1x12s down to make 2 sides and a long top. Now, normally I prefer to build my entire project before applying any finish, but in this case I was using a water-based stain, and if you're not familiar with water-based stains, they dry really fast and are a bit finicky. So I knew that it would be best to stain these pieces separately before assembling. If I was painting or using an oil-based stain, I would absolutely wait until the very end to finish because doing it this way made this project take way longer. Anyway, I applied a pre-stain, sanded, then stained each piece separately, and once that was dry, I drilled pocket holes to assemble. I screwed the top piece between the two sides, flush to the top edges. Then I cut 2 1x12 pieces to serve as the vertical dividers. I wanted these pieces to be cut out at the bottom, almost like a built-in corbel. I don't know if there's a term for that, but I just measured up from the bottom about 13 inches and in from the back edge about 1.5 inches. Then I tried to find a round object to trace my shape with. I couldn't find anything that I was just loving, so I grabbed some flexible molding that I had bought a long time ago and never used. This actually worked kind of perfect because I could line it up with my marks and then shape it how I wanted to trace around. After cutting this with a jigsaw, I traced this onto my second divider and cut it to match. Then I cut some shelves and 1x3 supports to go on each side of this hutch. I drilled pocket holes into the ends of the shelves and the support pieces before, once again, staining each piece individually. I'll admit that staining everything separately before assembling for this project was pretty annoying, but the final finish turned out really great, so I guess it was worth it. Once everything was stained, I started assembling the left and right supports, shelves, and dividers into the hutch with pocket hole screws. I added these 1x3 supports along the back at the top and the bottom. These will allow me to secure it to the wall once assembled. Then I secured the dividers to the top panel with wood screws. Then I added 2 shelves on each side and I used a speed square to make sure that they were square from the front to the back. So now I needed to measure the middle and cut 2 more shelves and 2 more supports to finish this middle section. I also went ahead and cut the pieces for the face frame so that I could stain everything at once. For the face frame, I used 1x3 for the sides and the top, and then 1x2s along the bottom and the dividers. Now remember that I said this was going into a nook. I've mentioned this several times in previous videos, but when I'm butting something with a face frame up against a wall or another cabinet, I like to build my box, or in this case my shelf, a little undersized and then build my face frame so that it hangs over the sides a little bit. That way, I don't have to worry about adjusting for out of square drywall corners, and if something needs a little shaving to fit, it's a lot easier to shape or sand down the edge of a face frame versus the entire side of a cabinet. That said, my opening here was about 61.5 inches, so I built my shelf 60 inches wide, and then I built my face frame 61.5 inches wide, so it overhangs each side about 3/4 of an inch. If you're building yours to be open or visible on the sides, just make your face frame so that it's the same width as the shelf without any overhang. I stained the middle shelves and face frame pieces just like all the pieces before, then I installed the middle shelves and supports the same as the left and right shelves. And at this point, it's ready for the face frame. To assemble the face frame, I used pocket holes again, but this time I used the Craig Micro pocket hole jig just because it makes smaller holes and is less likely to split on these narrow boards. Then I assembled the face frame with the smaller panhead pocket hole screws made for these smaller holes. Once the face frame was together, I test fit to make sure it would work before gluing and brad nailing it onto the front. Now the last part is adding the back. To keep with the country rustic vibe, I decided to use shiplap for the back instead of a solid piece. So I bought some 1x8 shiplap boards and cut them to run along the entire back side of the cabinet. I flipped this all over on its back because I think it was easier to just see if it was centered that way.
So I want to get these like centered, and then I'll mark and just rip down the edge on the table saw to like rip off whatever sticks out. I think that's probably pretty close. All right, so I'm just gonna mark this so I know to cut along that line, and right here to cut along that line.
I trimmed my two end pieces at my marks so they'll be flush to the sides of the hutch. Then, just like all of the other pieces, I stain them before installing. Now, I said this before, water-based stain is a little tricky to apply, but the best part is that it dries super fast. So by the time that I had stained all of these pieces, they were ready to install, one by one. So I started at one end and simply screwed these pieces onto the back side of the hutch. I did make sure to pre-drill here because pine tends to split really easily, especially toward the end of the board. Once all the shiplap was secured, I flipped it back over to add the very last piece, some crown molding. Now again, since this is going into a nook, I just cut this crown piece with square ends, but if the sides will be visible, you'd want to wrap this molding around so that all sides are trimmed out. And with that, the simple hutch shelf is complete. I'll come back and add a polyacrylic clear coat once it's installed in the pantry because right now it's 100 degrees outside and this would be best to apply that inside. Once this is placed on the base it's going to rest on, it should be secured to the wall studs through the back 1x3 supports to prevent tip over. And just in case you're wondering, I'm showing it to you here first because once it's in the pantry, the space is so cramped, there's not a great angle for the camera to see the entire thing. So here she is in all of her glory, and here she is installed. While I don't really have anything to store on here yet, it does make a great addition to the pantry, and I'm really glad to have finally made at least a little more progress on this space. I hope you enjoy seeing this project come together, and if you'd like to build your own, I've got the printable plans linked below. Thanks so much for watching, friends, and until next time, happy building!